That wasn't the only thing troubling her. The thought of going back home to Chike filled her with fear. She couldn't return to that house of horrors. Not now, not ever. The nurse returned later with a soft smile, telling Adaeze she could see her baby in the neonatal unit, but she must be conscious. The child, a girl, was so small, humped up to machines that hummed and beeped rhythmically. Adaeze stared at her baby through the glass, her heart aching with a mix of love and fear. The baby was fragile, fighting for every breath, but something in her tiny form gave Adaeze strength. She had to be strong for her daughter's sake. She could no longer afford to live in fear. As she gazed at her child, something strange began to trouble her guts. The guilt and fear she carried started to twist into something more, something darker. For the first time, Adaeze allowed herself to question Chike's behavior. Why had he changed so drastically after they got married? Why had his anger escalated so quickly? She began to suspect that there was more to this rage than mere frustration or financial strength. But what? That night, Adaeze couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, haunted by memories of Chike's cruelty and flashes of his face contorted with anger. Then, out of nowhere, something else came to her mind. A face. It wasn't Chike's face, though. It was someone else. Someone she had almost forgotten about. It was a woman, and the image that fluttered in her memory was hazy, like a picture viewed through frosted glass. The face belonged to Amaka, Chike's former girlfriend. Adaeze had met her once briefly when she and Chike were still dating. At that time, Chike had brushed Amaka off as a mistake from his past, someone who had been too much trouble. Adaeze had believed him, never giving it a second thought. But now, lying in her hospital bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why had Chike never spoken of Amaka after that? Why had his face turned so dark whenever the subject of his past relationships came up? The next morning, despite her weakened condition, Adaeze asked the nurse for a phone. She needed answers. It took several hours of scrolling through social media and online searches, but eventually, Adaeze found what she was looking for. There it was, buried in an old news article from a few years ago. Woman found dead in Lagos apartment. Boyfriend questioned. Later released due to lack of evidence. The picture next to the article was unmistakably, it was Amaka. Adaeze's blood ran cold. She read and reread the article, trying to make sense of it. According to the report, Amaka had been found dead under mysterious circumstances. There were signs of a struggle, but no one could prove who had been responsible. Chike had been her boyfriend at the time, and although he had been questioned by the police, they hadn't found enough evidence to charge him. The case has gone cold. Adaeze's hand shook as she put down the phone. Could it be? Could Chike have had something to do with Amaka's death? The more she thought about it, the more the pieces started to fall into place. Chike's sudden change in behavior, his anger, his drinking, it all made sense now. It wasn't just financial stress or a rough patch in their marriage. He was hiding something terrible. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. She was married to a man who might be capable of murder, and she had stayed with him, endured his abuse, hoping he would change. How had she been so blind? The next day, while sitting in the neonatal unit, watching her baby struggle to breathe, Adaeze made a decision. She couldn't go back to that house. She wouldn't let Chike near their child, but she needed a plan. She needed to find a way to live without him knowing. And more importantly, she needed proof of what he had done, or he would follow her, find her, and the cycle of abuse would start all over again. But before she could act on her plan, there was an unexpected knock on her hospital door. Adaeze, a familiar voice said, and her heart stopped. It was Chike. How had he found her? Adaeze questioned. Her blood ran cold as he stepped into the room, his face unusually calm, almost too calm. He didn't seem like the raging, abusive man she had left behind. This was the man she had first fallen in love with. But now, after all she had uncovered, his calm nature terrified her more than his anger ever had. It felt like a mask, hiding something much darker. How is the baby? Chike asked, his voice smooth, almost caring. Adaeze's heart pounded in her chest. She had to stay calm, had to pretend she hadn't found out anything yet. If he suspects that she knew, there was no telling what he might do. She's doing better, Adaeze replied, her voice shaky. The doctor said it will take time. Chike nodded, his eyes scanning the room, lingering on her face. I've been worried about you, he said. I know things have been hard lately, but I'm ready to make things right. Adaeze swallowed hard. She had heard these promises before, always followed by more abuse. But now, knowing what she did, she couldn't trust him. She needed to get out of there, but how? Her body was still weak from the surgery, and Chike was blocking the door. I need to rest, she said, trying to sound as neutral as possible. I'm really tired. Chike didn't move. Instead, he stepped closer to her bed, his eyes narrowing. Adaeze, we need to talk. I know you have been thinking about leaving me. His voice was low, dangerous. But that's not going to happen. You're my wife. You're going to come home with me, and we are going to raise our child together. Her heart raised. How did he know? Had someone told him, or had he been watching her, following her all along? I'm not leaving, she stammered, trying to keep her voice steady. I just need time to recover. Chike leaned closer, his breath hot on her face. Don't lie to me, Adaeze. I know you have been talking to people. You think you can just walk away, but you can't. You are mine. A surge of adrenaline shot through her. She couldn't let him take her. She couldn't let him take her child. But before she could say anything, the door to the room burst open and two police officers stepped in. Chike Okafor, one of the officers said, his voice firm, we need you to come with us. Chike spun around, his face contorted with rage. What is this? He shouted. What are you doing here? We received a report, the officer said, his eyes shifting to Adaeze. There have been accusations of domestic violence and we need to investigate. Adaeze's heart leaped in her chest. Someone had reported him, but who? She hadn't told anyone. Had one of the nurses overheard something? She didn't know, but at that moment, it didn't matter. All that mattered was that Chike was being taken away, at least for now. Chike tried to protest, but the officers were firm as they led him out of the room. He glared at Adaeze, his eyes filled with hatred. This isn't over, he hissed. I will be back. Once he was gone, Adaeze collapsed back onto the bed, her body shaking with relief and terror. She was safe for now, but she knew Chike's words were not empty. He would come back, And when he returned, he would be more dangerous than ever. Over the next few days, Adaeze walked quietly and swiftly. With the help of the hospital social worker, she contacted a woman's shelter and arranged to be moved to a safe location with her baby once she was discharged. She also met with a lawyer who advised her on how to file for a restraining order and begin the process of divorce. But there was still one thing left unresolved: Amaka's death. Adaeze knew she wouldn't rest until she uncovered the truth. Before she left the hospital, she made one last phone call to a journalist who had written about Amaka's case. She told the journalist everything, from the abuse to her suspicions about Chike's involvement in Amaka's death. The journalist listened carefully, promising to look into it and dig deeper. As Adaeze left the hospital with her baby in her arms, she knew that her fight was far from over. Chike was still out there, and the shadows of his past were closing in. But now, for the first time, she had hope. Hope that she would build a new life for herself and her daughter. Hope that justice would be served. And as she stepped into the sunlight, leaving the hospital behind, Adaeze knew one thing for certain: she would never be the same woman again. She had been broken, but she had survived.